Well, hello there. What is going on, everybody? So if you saw my review recently, I just recently watched the film Halloween Ends. And so because I just watched the film Halloween Ends, I thought it would be fun to go back through the entire Halloween franchise, which I've actually watched relatively recently, and give my rank list. I'm going to go through my least favorite Halloween film to my favorite Halloween film. And as I say in all of these videos that I've done throughout my entire YouTube career, this is just my opinion. You might not agree with my opinion. Actually, you're probably not going to. We all have these unique opinions. I've seen a lot of rank lists of Halloween recently that just kind of baffle me. And so I'm looking forward to getting into it now. There are 13 films in the Halloween franchise, so I'm going to cover every single one of them to an extent, and I'm going to get into it right now. Coming in at number 13 is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. This is one of the most miserable films I have ever watched in my life. I can't stand Rob Zombie for the most part. I feel like he has no idea how to write dialogue. Definitely hates young adults because the way he writes the young adults in this film, it's just so unrealistic and over the top. I didn't hate the first installment of his film as much as I hated this one, but as many reviews as I've read that call this like a masterpiece of like talking about overcoming trauma and dealing with depression, the performances are so terrible and it's so poorly written that I don't know how you would ever get that across in the overall finished product. It's also incredibly mean-spirited. There's so much dialogue in this film that targets things now that I feel like if a movie was released with that kind of dialogue now, it would be talked about in a very negative light, and it just feels gross. His movies feel disgusting, and I feel like Rob Zombie was not the person to pick to pay homage to such a nuanced and great film like John Carpenter's original Halloween. This movie just is gross, and I don't recommend it to anyone. I just rewatched it this week, and yeah, I'm not a fan. Coming in at number 12, Halloween Resurrection. Yes, the film where Busta Rhymes does kung fu. This movie is a slog to get through. It's really difficult compared to some of the other ones where even if they're miserable, you can still watch them. It's not like they're the most awful things in the world. This movie takes a lot to get through. All of the protagonists are really unlikable. I feel like the setting isn't that great. Michael Myers looks really ridiculous in this movie. I'm not a huge fan of his mask. Even though there is that comedic sequence with Busta Rhymes towards the end of the film, it's just not something I want to sit around and watch. It really kind of takes away what the filmmakers did with Halloween H2O and just ruins it at the beginning of the film. Laurie Strode has done a horrible disservice, she's my favorite character in this entire franchise, and it's just not something that I really look forward to revisiting anytime I watch this franchise. Coming in at number 11 is David Gordon Green's Halloween Kills. This was also a miserable slog to get through. I really appreciated the beginning of the film with the throwback to the original film, but the problem that I have with this movie is the character writing is so bad, and the entire middle section of this film is a completely bloated waste of time. The whole sequence at the hospital where they mistake that homeless person for Michael Myers and like the town is up in arms, and I understand that people say, oh, it's supposed to create this idea of paranoia in this town, and I'm thinking this is a guy who killed like 7 people in the 1970s. I'm surprised that most people even remember. It's just a really silly, stupid movie. It does have some really great kills, but by the end of it, it's just so absurd. They treat Michael Myers like he's Superman, and it's just really silly, and I'm not a fan of this movie at all. I get that if people want to enjoy it just because they like the kill sequences, but aside from that, it's a really sloppy movie. Coming in at number 10, Rob Zombie's Halloween. I am not a fan of these Rob Zombie Halloween films. I really like the first half of this film if it was done as its own thing. This whole like tragic backstory of Michael Myers raised in this like redneck family and he's abused. Like the thing that makes John Carpenter's Halloween so interesting is that Michael Myers is pure evil. There's no explanation as to why he's so terrible. He just is. And what I love about that movie is you don't need the explaining. You don't need someone to ham-fistedly tell you, hey, he was abused as a child and oh, he was treated this way. But as its own separate thing, it's fine. Rob Zombie does an okay job with the storytelling, but once it jumps into the actual like recreation of Halloween, the actress who plays Laurie Strode is horrible. The dialogue between the kids is so terrible. The kill sequences are okay. I really don't like the way Rob Zombie shoots them, especially similarly to Halloween 2. There's a lot of like handheld camera stuff stuff. It's really shaky. It doesn't look very good. And it's just not a fun movie for me. I'm not a fan of like the really gross dialogue that Rob Zombie writes. I get that his whole mentality behind it is to try to make these characters gross, but it feels almost done in like a way that is just overblowing it that I just can't get behind. Coming in at number 9, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. This movie is a mess, but despite it being a mess, it has some pretty decent atmosphere. I know the producer's cut or whatever it is, I watched that recently. It's okay, it structures it together a little bit better, but it's still a difficult movie to get through because most of the runtime is incredibly boring. I don't mind the lead actress in this one. She does a pretty decent job, but for the most part, this whole idea of like cementing Michael Myers as the product of this cult is just a really silly idea for a film anyway. And like I said, that kind of pulls away from John Carpenter's original vision of just having Michael Myers be this presence and this entity of evil. And I think that taking away from that kind of does a disservice to the rest of the franchise. I know once they came back with H2O, they seemed to kind of ignore that film, which is fine with me because I don't think that it really adds anything into the franchise. And this just isn't one that I really look forward to revisiting. It's kind of bland and it's not a lot of fun. Coming in at number 8 is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. For some reason, people really love this movie, and I find it incredibly boring. I don't see anything really redeemable about this aside from atmosphere. It's essentially a soft reboot of the original because people were so upset with Halloween 3 that they didn't include Michael Myers, and so they're like, we'll just give them what they want and do it all over again. And I don't know, this movie just really doesn't do anything for me. You get the introduction of Danielle Harris as Jamie, which I know is a character that's beloved in this series, but Halloween 4, I mean, aside from having some atmospheric moments, it really is just bland. There's not a whole lot that happens. Michael Myers isn't nearly as menacing in this film as he is in the first couple of installments, and I just, every time I revisit this, I try to put myself in the mindset of why do people like this movie so much, and I just can't wrap my brain around it other than people just want more of the same, which is Michael Myers walking around hallways going after people, and that's not what I want from this franchise. I think that trying to do something more innovative and interesting and kind of changing it up is what I always look for. You can't really do the same thing with just an evil guy in a mask that doesn't really have any interesting backstory, and this movie just doesn't do it for me. I'm not really sure what it does for other people, but it definitely doesn't do it for me. Coming in at number 7 is Halloween 2018. I am not a fan of most of the David Gordon Green films, and I thought this was a pretty weak installment in this franchise. The whole thing with the podcasters is just so silly. It didn't make any sense to me why 2 podcasters would care so much about a guy who killed like a few people in the 1970s, but you know, I guess there's people that cover a lot less cases in the United States, but it was just really silly and stupid. It focused so much on them, and I feel like for a film that was touted as like, it's Laurie Strode's return, she's coming back, she's going to be the central focus of this entirely new trilogy, she's not in the movie a whole lot, and the third act sequence is pretty good. I like some of the kills in this movie, which is why it ranks higher than the other ones on this list, but I feel like the dialogue in this film is so cringeworthy, especially when you're looking at this in Halloween Kills. It just isn't that effective as an entertaining horror movie to me. It's one of those, I still have kind of a hard time getting through it. I've seen this one I think 3 times now, and every time I try to see what people love so much in it, and I just don't get it other than people just, like I said with the last movie, they want more of the same. They want Michael Myers moving around hallways and stabbing people, and I want a little bit more with the character development. I'd like a little bit more fleshing out with him and Laurie Strode if they're going to go in that direction, and this movie just doesn't really do that. Coming in at number 6, this might irritate some people, but I don't care. Halloween 5. I actually find this movie to be really entertaining because it doesn't take itself seriously. This has Jamie Lloyd's character return, which I know people hated that at the end of 4, they implied that she was going to be evil, and this one it kind of turns its back on it. But I don't care. I didn't really talk about it much at the beginning of this video, but the Halloween franchise isn't really one that holds near and dear to my heart other than John Carpenter's original and some of the other films. And this movie is just silly. The cops in it are are really funny. I love how unhinged Donald Pleasance is in this movie, just screaming at children. The actual like chase sequence for Jamie at the end of the film through the air duct is really suspenseful and well shot, and there's so much to like in this movie. And I'm not sure why people hate on it so much, because it's really a lot better than 4, and it's a hell of a lot better than 6. And I think that the reason why people don't like this one is because it plays heavier into the camp element of it. But I would much rather have a film that tries to take a different direction. I feel similarly about this film as I do to Friday the 13th Part 5, which is like it took a different direction by not having Jason Voorhees in it, and people hate it for that reason. Well, I really like this movie, and I enjoy it more and more every time I watch it. Coming in at number 5 is Halloween 2. I really enjoy the atmosphere of this film. I really like this idea of like Laurie Strode directly after the effects of the first film taken to the hospital, and Michael Myers getting to the hospital to kill her. I'm not really a huge fan of the whole spin of like that they're siblings. I feel like it's a really silly twist that was just the production company trying to find a way to extend this franchise, and it's not really my favorite element of the movie, but I think that comparatively to the later films in this franchise, this movie continues the atmosphere of the first film and really just builds up that suspense well. I really like the like jacuzzi tub kill sequence in this one. I think it's really well done. And this one is still really entertaining. When I revisit Halloween 2, I always really enjoy myself, and it's definitely a fun ride. Coming in at number 4, Halloween Ends, the newest in the installment. I just did a full review on this, so you can go check that out if you want to get my full thoughts on it. But I really love that this movie took a unique approach to the storytelling about Michael Myers. I kind of like that he's a subdued character in the background, and that we're really just kind of getting the overall impact of what he did to Haddonfield, rather than just him moving through houses and killing people again. Introducing the character of Corey Cunningham and kind of introducing this idea of like the evil inside of him, and will it come out, won't it come out, and how the ramifications of the trauma that he was exposed to early on in the film would later on affect him in his own life. I really appreciate that, and I think it's a super unique and interesting twist to an idea of the first two in David Gordon Green's trilogy, which I didn't think were effective at all. And this is a movie that I'm going to see myself revisiting quite a bit. I had a smile on my face the whole runtime, and if you want my full thoughts on this one, go watch my new review. At number 3 is Halloween H2O. I absolutely love this movie. I know there's a lot of people that have a lot of problems with it, but I feel like if you're going to look at the trauma that Laurie Strode overcame from the original Halloween film, this movie does a really great job of it. Obviously, compared to David Gordon Green's trilogy, she didn't like lock herself up in a bunker and hide for the rest of her life. She moved forward with her life, and she becomes this teacher at the school. She's like really high standing there. She's in a relationship. I really like that it kind of shows that the trauma didn't control her for all those years, but that she still has it in the back of her head, and that she's still trying to overcome that. And I think that this movie gives Laurie Strode the closure that she deserves, and I think Halloween Ends did a good job giving her the closure that she deserves. But this movie is really entertaining, and I think that it's really atmospheric. Jamie Lee Curtis's performance is fantastic, and I know there's a lot of people who are like, oh, the beginning of this film is so boring. I think that it's really well structured, and it makes a really great third act punch. And I enjoy this one more every time I watch it. I think it definitely cements itself as one of the top in the franchise, and I'm always looking forward to revisiting it whenever it comes around. So my final 2 on the list are interchangeable. I'm sure that you can tell if you've been paying attention what my final 2 on the list are, but I'm going to get into them now. It just kind of depends on my mood. So coming in at number 2 is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, a film that by a lot of film lover standards and horror lover standards people love, and people that are obsessed with the Michael Myers franchise hate this movie. And the reason why is because Michael Myers is not included in this. This was John Carpenter's original vision, to call a film Halloween but have it be a different subject matter every single year when they would release a new one. And I love that idea. I think it's so much fun to have this idea of like horror anthology, creating these stories, and this idea of masks that literally eat children's faces that like bugs get in there, and it's just absolutely disgusting. And I think that this movie builds great atmosphere. It has mystery, it has nuance, it has everything that I want in a film. And it also has a really amazing soundtrack. The Silver Shamrock theme gets stuck in my head all the time. This is a movie that I feel like is perfect for this time of year, that every time I revisit it I love it. And I think that the diehard Michael Myers fans that hate on this movie, I don't think that they've really ever given it a chance as its own separate entity and understand why it exists as a whole. And that's really disappointing, because if more films like this would have been made instead of like 4, even 5 that I enjoy, or 6, I think that it would have been a much more interesting thing to see over the years. And I think that's why Halloween Ends took a very different direction while still having Michael Myers in the film. And I really love Halloween 3. It's so much fun, and I look forward to rewatching it every time I see it. Coming in at number 1 is, to probably no one's surprise, is John Carpenter's original Halloween. This movie redefined horror films as we know it, created an entire franchise of films that we know as the slasher genre, even though Black Christmas came before it, which is another film that I absolutely love, but it was not a pinnacle in this genre as much as Halloween was. And what I think is so amazing about this is what I said earlier in the video, is that John Carpenter's original vision for this was just that Michael Myers was an evil kid who for no reason killed his sister, came back all these years later and just murdered babysitters. There's no rhyme or reason for it. He's just a horrible human being that did terrible things. And I feel like that is a really interesting route to go, rather than it be like, oh, he's a pawn of a cult, or oh, he was abused when he was a child. It's so much scarier to think that someone is after you who has no reason to be after you other than he likes to kill people. And this movie does a great job of always having Michael Myers in the background, but he's never the central focus until the 3rd act of the film. You just feel his presence. I love how, even though this was shot in Southern California, that you get that Midwest vibe. I know that there's a joke that like John Carpenter had like bags of leaves that he would pull out and blow around, and it's really funny to think about that in hindsight. You even see palm trees in the original Halloween in the background. But I think that the movie is so much fun and so entertaining. John Carpenter truly had a passion for this project, and obviously he didn't want to continue it on as far as it went, but I think even the score that he worked on for this film is so iconic, created one of the most amazing horror themes in the entire history of horror movies. Jamie Lee Curtis's performance as Laurie Strode at such a young age is so incredible and iconic. There's so many amazing shots in this film. Just that scene of Michael Myers in Laurie Strode's backyard behind the laundry, him next to that bush hiding there. There's so many great moments in this movie that I feel like are pinnacles of horror history, and I would be doing the film a disservice not to put it at number 1, because it just is so much better than all of the rest of the films in the entire franchise. And I love John Carpenter. I always will love John Carpenter, and the best part about this new trilogy is that we got more original music from John Carpenter. That is my ranking of the Halloween franchise. As I said, this is not a franchise that really means a whole lot to me. I think that they have some fun moments, but compared to like Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, Scream, all those movies that really hold near and dear to my heart, the original Halloween I really enjoy, but aside from that, it's not like a franchise that I feel super invested in. So my reviews will probably be a little bit different than yours, but I'll be really interested to hear what films are your favorites. Let me know in the comments, and I'm really looking forward to reading them. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always looking for new material to review, and I look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.